righty. Let's see. I got these here because I want to read them. That is going out of the way. And let me just set my book and stuff up, and then I shall be ready. And hopefully Stephanie will join me. And she hasn't sent me anything saying otherwise. So I'm assuming that she'll probably pop in. Good morning. Good morning. I am excited to be here today. Oh, but I would tell you, Stephanie was saying the other day, like she loves to feel her workout in her body, right? That feeling of really having worked out. And sometimes I get soreness, and that soreness is just like, I keep stretching it. It just like, just, and so whenever I feel that in my body, it's like I want to stretch it and just make it feel normal again. As a matter of fact, this morning I was thinking to myself, it would be wonderful to go for some reflexology and just have somebody work on my legs, because my legs are in this constant state of, do I want to say tingle or something? And so I need, but my, so lately I have, since reading the 5 a.m. Club, if you read that book, it's a powerful book on reclaiming your morning, right? And so there's so much about it that I love, right? I love that it makes you think about what you do with your time, and just really having it ordered. I will say that since Miami, I have been struggling to keep up with my time. So like this morning, my alarm goes off and I remember turning it off but not getting up. And so I didn't get up until like 5 minutes to 5, which meant that I should have already been through or partially through my workout, and before I go on with the rest of my stuff. So it is one of those things where, now I'm struggling to keep up. So since I already started my workout late, then I was like, okay, I'll just walk the dog around the corner, because she seems like she's in one of those curious moods. So I walk the dog, and then by the time I get back here, I'm struggling to get my meditation in, and I did not do my journaling. And and then it was, it was time. So I did write work on my book for like 10 minutes, and then it was time to come in here. So it's kind of, sometimes it's just a struggle trying to stay ahead of the game, stay ahead of what it is that you're supposed to do. So I've been running a little behind all day. So, and I make it sound like it's all day, and it's just now 7:30 for most of you. And so what does that mean? That most of the time, how they used to have that little advertisement that said, when you're in the military, we get more done by a certain time of morning than some people get done all day. And so that is, that can be literally the case with me. Just that I am often running early in the morning and trying to get some stuff done. And I am still not taking the best advantage that I can of my time. And so just trying to catch up on and on getting ahead or being ahead of the game would be an amazing accomplishment. So good morning to you. Welcome to my world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited because, and before anybody says anything about this, I just felt like wearing white today. And this was the coolest white shirt that I could find right quick. So I don't know why. I just felt like, oh, I want to wear something white today. And maybe that'll be how I am all day, is in white. I don't know. Anyway, this is cream, I think, but whatever the case may be. So good morning to you. I am in my spot, and I am so glad that you are here and that you are joining me today at whatever time you joined in on the conversation. As you know, we were doing the section on managing sexual energies out of Anatomy of the Spirit. Oh, I got my little sticky note on here. Didn't mean to do that. My sticky note reminds me to say, this little sticky note reminds me to say, yeah, but. Because a lot of times there is this, this need to be decisive and incorporate all these different ideas. Well, no, let me say it this way. Sometimes we get stuck in our ideas and our feelings and all of that stuff and present things as if they are the gospel truth. And so I try to, especially when I'm out giving talks, I try to incorporate that yeah but energy, because a lot of times people will sit there and they will look at or listen to what you say and how I say it from my perspective, and my perspective is not necessarily like the collective perspective. I do have my own set of experiences, as I'm sure you have your own set of experiences. And sometimes those overlap or intersect, or we can relate to one another. And sometimes you get the yeah, but. And which is the wonderful thing about having a partner, and a partner like Stephanie, because she comes from a different standpoint of view, one that was, very religious in background. And while I'm a minister now, I still don't have the perspective of trying. I mean, for a while, I tried to be what they call a good girl, but that's not my truth. And so, I was one of those that, like, guys were out trying to sow their wild oats. I was doing one and the same thing. I was, doing what I did. I wasn't trying to, and I don't try to delude people into thinking that I have been. If you know me, you know that I haven't been, right? You know that I'm probably not now, because there is something about me that, that just that embraces and loves living in this thing that I call truth. And so if that is the case, then I try to own what it is that I do. And while I don't necessarily broadcast that and don't need you to broadcast that for me, I do, when it comes up from me, I do want to give voice to it, even when it's awkward. So I recognize that sometimes some of the things that I say will be off-putting to people, disconcerting. Stephanie says she's having internet issues. So so we'll continue on. Let me say this. Thanks. Catch up when you can. And when and if you can. And that would be a heart. and a kissy face, but I'm not putting the kissy face on here. Anyway, so I don't want to, so my experience, I know that sometimes people are just like, oh my God, did she say that? Or did she really experience that? Or did she do that? And the short answer of that is yes. Yes, I talk about my truth and I experience it from that perspective, but I know that it is not necessarily the collective experience of everybody. And so I try to make room for the yeah, but I try to make room for the people who did it the right, quote unquote, right way or something or other. And I try to, respect that, to respect that energy is out there. I also try to respect the fact that I know that we have a cultural background, a cultural narrative that makes our experience sometimes unique or different, but still there is a processing that needs to take place and an understanding that needs to go into what it is that we do. So today we are talking, we move a little deeper into this where it talks about managing sexual energy. We're moving into a different section. And so this one is just about it's about so much. It's about this feelings of so first off, we're going to talk a little bit about violating sexual energy. Not necessarily. Let me just talk about what I'm going to talk about, and then we'll circle back, because there are things even that I want to contribute to this. So she says in this particular thing, in this particular chakra, it is one of the guiding principles is to honor one another. And in honoring one another, she says is easily to eclipse, is easily eclipsed. This idea of honoring one another is easily eclipsed and in sexual encounters, largely, my mouth is going to catch up to my mind in a second, largely because sexual energy is so often controlled by fear and unrestrained desires. Now, a lot of times, one of the things that we in our society we have is that we've got a lot, and I don't know that it's not unlike this in other societies, but there is a lot of fear that is built up around sexual encounters. So there is an awkwardness that we come into, especially when we're unfamiliar or inexperienced when it comes down to dealing with the opposite sex. And because we are so emotionally tender in those moments, it can be very hard for us to say that this is one, what I desire, and then two, have not necessarily know how another person will respond to it, because sometimes what we desire and what we feel or think, we don't know for sure it's being mirrored in the people that are around us. And because there is such a mystique and a cloak and all of this stuff around our own sexuality, we have a lot of anxiety that's built up. And so there is just this desire, this part of us that wants to be normal, right? And what is normal, right? We don't know if normal is, you know, I don't know. We don't know what's normal, right? Some people might view, just kissing and missionary stuff as normal. Somebody else may view, the people who want to be dominated or even beaten, or or have some level of punishment attached to their sexual desires. I mean, there are all kinds of things that go on in the mind of people, And sometimes we know it's not normal. And sometimes we think there is a part of us that is like, ooh, and just because it's not normal, we are gravitating towards it. So there's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety that is developed around this. And these unexpressed, right? Unexpressed desires that we have. So she says men are made afraid of not being potent. I might have read through some of this yesterday, but I'm not going to go over all of it, but there is this fear that men have about and around their desires, around what it is that they're doing, that they don't feel like they can come to the table with. They don't want that, oh my God, kind of, response from you when they ask you to do something. So we've got, and so for men and for women, these things are different, right? So for women, there's this desire to be what is known as a good girl. And what do good girls do? Good girls, I mean, it's so sometimes the opposite. So while men or young men can go out and sow their wild oats and they think it's funny, girls get the message early on that we have fallopian tubes, that we've got an egg inside of us, that we could possibly get pregnant and have babies. So don't give it up until you get married, right? That out of the context of marriage, and I don't know that men get this same kind of pressure on them. But outside of marriage, you are about to ruin your life if you go forward with these desires that you have, even though it's nature working on you. It's not even something that you conjure up in your own mind. It's like your body starts to respond in ways, and all you know is like, hey, something different is happening here. And so we struggle with this, right? We struggle with it. And then there is this pull, this urge that is so intense. I mean, you've been there. You've been through that. Even when you get close to somebody, it's like something starts to happen. Something starts to wake up. All of that stuff is true for both boys and girls, but we get very different messages as it relates. So sex has always had this potential to be very volatile, and volatile not just because we can poop there, have a baby, right? But volatile because there is a part of us that feels as though we might lose our freaking minds, right? I don't know about you, but you know, we have this notion that sometimes let me read here what she says. She says the view of sexual energy as necessary but always potentially out of control contributes enormously to our society's schizophrenic tribal attitude towards sexual expression. So there's the potential to for it to just make you y'all, we portray it like we do, at least I know this is how I've seen it portrayed, like we do an addicted person who no longer has control over their choices because their choices are now dictated by their addiction. The same is true when we are talking about sexuality. Left unchecked, we are fearful that it would be like an addiction. And therefore, we would be vulnerable to another, because if we get strung out like you would on a drug, if you get strung out, then you just whooped. Isn't that what they call it? They call it whooped. That somehow somebody could have your string, pull your string, lead you around on a leash. And that is a big fear that a lot of times we have. about this thing of sexual expression. And so on one hand, we recognize the power of it. The other hand, yes, we want to be possessed by it, but still on the other hand, it's like, yeah, but not to that degree. And so we're constantly playing this game with it, like, ooh, how do I go forward but not too forward? How do I keep the reins on this? And so she says our society encourages us to act out in ways that are sexual, um whether it's look sexy, act sexy, dress sexy, all of those things. It encourages us to do that. But then when we do so, it then tries to ostracize or punish us for doing the very thing that we do. So it's almost as if there should be a cluster of people who are licensed, or who can look sexy, act sexy, dress sexy, but all the rest of y'all need to put on a frock or a house dress and raise some kids, right? You can't be one and the same. And so there is this tug of war, this pull between these pairs of what seems like opposites, but really in actuality might be that is laying dormant in all of us. I mean, when we look at where else do we see this played out in nature, is it and I think it's in part because we take this idea about what it means to be sexy and sexual as a woman, and makes it like this thing that only certain people can do, and those people we don't look too highly or too good upon, right? And then the others are supposed to be the mothers or the wives or the people who are supposed to be so good. And so that dichotomy is problematic, because what happens is that it makes, when you see something happen in society, whether it is like a rape or a sexual assault, we make it seem as though, well, had she not been so provocative, had she not been so sexy, had she not been this, then this wouldn't have happened. So we continuously blame women for doing what is natural, like, expressing themselves in particular ways, and then don't turn around and hold men accountable for their actions and responses, as if they are powerless to control themselves over the feminine wiles that apparently possess them. And so there is this dichotomy that we still have to come to some reckoning about, right? So why can't it be that we are both the virgin as well as the nymph, right? Why can't we incorporate those two and see it all as being a part of a whole, as opposed to making it seem as though and one of the words that I love is bastardized parts of ourselves that we throw away, we give away, all of that stuff, rather than getting comfortable with who we are. So she says the societal mind is uncomfortable with blaming a rapist or a batterer or a murderer because, yeah, because he was powerless to do those things. Women have been raped and are still scrutinized. Women who have been raped are still being scrutinized for what they were wearing or where they were or who they were with or what time it was. It was kind of like, was it Mike Tyson or Robin, I can't even remember her name, Robin Givens or somebody like that. When was that? Well, what were you doing if you went to a man's house at 3 o'clock in the morning? What else did you think was going to happen? I mean, right, really, right? What else do you think? I mean, so society wants to dictate to us the actions. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was younger, I would sit on the phone until 5 o'clock in the morning talking to somebody. I mean, just all in the romance and thing. And at a certain point, you might be like, yeah, let's get off the phone. Let's, come on over. We gonna be up anyway. I'll cook breakfast, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that I am breakfast. It means that I'll cook breakfast. And so when we sit there and we give out messages as if to say, well, what did you expect? It's almost like we're giving license for this to happen and rehappen over and over again by our scrutinizing of it like that. And so at a certain point, we have to say to our young men, just like we say to our young women, that self-control is just that. It is something that you can control. You can control yourself. You can make decisions. You are not powerless, right? Um, and but here I digress because I know that this is personal to me. I've been in this situation before, and we've got words for that. We call women teases. We call them all kinds of stuff that implies that they deserve whatever it is that they what's coming. And it's ludicrous, right? Let me read. Women who have been raped are still scrutinized for what they wear and their private sexual lives. So then, just because, say for instance, you've had sex with 10 other men, then that makes it okay when this guy decides that what? I mean, we have to begin to talk about this in different terms, right? And I think one of the things that I remember somebody saying to me is that teaching people, right, is loving people. So if so we teach our children that the stove is hot because we don't want them to get burned, right? We teach them how to cross the street because we love them and we want to keep them safe. I mean, teaching is loving, right? And that's why we teach people stuff. I mean, in my community, in the Black community, there are lessons about encounters with police. There are lessons about trying to keep yourself safe. That's because of love. That's because we want people to to take care and to be safe. And so what is it when we fail to teach them? Is it not love? Is it loving? Oh, you know what they say, that we love our sons, but we raise our daughters. And so what we see a lot of times is that people will coddle their kids or coddle their sons in ways that they would never do their daughters. And so we try to teach women how to be responsible, but at the same time, we don't say to our young men this lesson about self-control. Oh, because of what? So I think that would be neglect if we fail to have a conversation about what it means to be um, to recognize. Oh, I had a conversation with some kids the other day about what it means to, because it seemed as if they didn't have the message that play should not hurt. Like it's not okay for you to beat up your sister or to kick your brother. It's not okay to do things that are harmful or hurtful on that level. And when you don't have conversations like that, what do you, I don't understand that. Let me get off of that. Let me get off of that. Because this is really one of those tender areas for me. But let me read to you what it is that she's saying. Women who are battered or raped by their boyfriends or husbands receive support from groups organizes specifically for their protection, but not actually from society as a whole. And so that's one of the reasons why we don't publish the names of rape victims, because a lot of times people who say that they've been raped then get pressure, judgment, scrutiny from society that says, look, leave that man alone, or or begin to blame the victims, or all kinds of stuff. And so it becomes this, not what the man did to me, but what I'm doing to him by dragging him over the coals. And if you hadn't, I mean, there's all of this dialogue that goes on around this stuff that to me is crazy, when we can simply teach people. And this starts out young, right? It doesn't wait. You don't wait until they get into college to say you've got to ask permission to touch somebody. It doesn't start off there. It starts off early on. And so we owe it to our to people. We owe it to our family. We owe it to people that we love to have these conversations about how you treat one another. So it says that the social mind still asks raped and abused women questions like, well, if he was so bad, why didn't you leave? Right? Implying that somehow the choices to stay are that cut and dry, that simple, right? And I know that it's not. It never is. Sometimes it is about finances. Sometimes it is because, you see a lot of people who actually love the people, and are in situations over which, there is a lot of craziness that goes on. And so it's never just one thing. Sometimes it is so much more, implying that these things can just be resolved through therapy. But somehow is not something that legally you should have any recourse to, right? And so that too becomes part of the blaming of the victim when it comes down to that you should have just left. Well, if it was that easy to leave, if there wasn't other extenuating circumstances. And sometimes, I've been telling people that I just finished reading the book by Cicely Tyson. And Cicely Tyson talked about her relationship with Miles Davis a lot. And while she felt as if she was being, I don't even know if she used abused as the word that of her choice, but while she felt like that relationship at times was very challenging and corrosive to her own spirit, she talks about also that this was the image of a relationship that she saw growing up. And so I have a friend of mine who who grew up in a household where she saw her mother abused. And we have seen people that are abused. And I had a couple that used to live across the street from me. And that woman, as an outsider, what you learn as an outsider is that people make their own choices, right? I don't know what her choices were or why she was making the choice. It wasn't for me to judge her, but I would see her getting beat up by her husband. But when the police came, or when somebody called the police or tried to intervene, she was the first that was like, no, right? And so there is always that question of what to do, how to be supportive. You don't know. I didn't know. And yeah, and so this whole thing is a convoluted area, and it comes down to what people sometimes it comes down to what people have been conditioned around. And you want to say to them, hey, this is not normal, right? And you can make better choices or different choices. Better applies a judgment on it. You can make a different choice for you and your child. You can get out of this, because that right there was just crazy. But yet and still, they were both on drugs, and yet and still she would stumble back to him and she would make it seem like, oh yeah, I did it. Like, I I don't know. I didn't get it. But we've seen it happen, and hopefully um recognize the toxicity of that when we're exposed to it, right? When we see those things happening. So minor criminal sentences rapists receive communicate a tribal attitude that sexual violations are still only somewhat illegal, as opposed to a genuine social atrocity. So it would be helpful if, if and when we are confronted or we see these types of things that happen, how can I be supportive? I know that whenever I go into a doctor's office, the doctor will ask me, as just, it's on her checklist, do you feel safe in your own home? And people don't always feel empowered or even want to disclose information when they don't feel safe in their own home. You have a lot of stuff that goes on, especially in communities where you got a lot of poverty, oppression, overcrowding, lack of money, lack of funds, sense of powerlessness, and having the desire to have power over another. All of those things work into and factor into this stuff. So it's not an easy cut and dry thing. But at the same time, as a society, we have to recognize that there is a role that we play. And as long as we turn a blind eye and act as if somebody somehow deserves to live like that, that I think too is a travesty on our society. It's yeah. This is crazy. So the dualism, let me go back to and read this next thing, because I got this whole paragraph highlighted. The dualism of the second chakra energies carries through societal views of sexual energy as out of control. On one hand, a high value our tribe places on self-control. On the other, wait a minute, I messed that all up, right? It carries the dualism of the second chakra energy carries through the society the view of sexual energy is out of control. That's one way. Whatever. We view sexuality as a continual threat to our ability to manage ourselves or control others. Relationships of any kind bring out in us our need to protect ourselves, but sexual bonds bring out extreme fears, especially if betrayal, a fear so strong that it can threaten an intimate relationship. So let me say this, because I get this, right? I don't know if, yes, you do, right? There is, on one hand, this fear that in the midst of a relationship or in the midst of something that is really like I talked about in that case study yesterday of Linda and her guy, and how their orgasm and their union was so intense that it scared the heck out of them. And he ran because he didn't understand it, and he felt like he had the ability to lose control in the context of that relationship. And a lot of times, so many of us feel as if we get in these things and it seems like it's going to be so good that we can lose ourselves. And so when we compare it to an addiction or a drug, it's that same kind of idea that if I continue down this path, I am vulnerable. I am liable to be manipulated, to be used, to lose control of myself. And so that on one hand is an amazingly intense fear, especially when we don't know that we can trust that other person who we've now had this intense interaction with. And so this idea of losing oneself or losing or their minds is a real fear that so many people have. And then there is this on the other hand, like, all right, so this is my good, and I need to make sure that I'm keeping it right where it is, and I'm I'm making sure that nobody else gets this, because if it's so good to me, it's going to be good to somebody else. And so therefore, even when you got a broke down man or a broke down woman, who one of my neighbors was saying about this woman, he was like, that woman, he was like, this guy was so in love with her, and he always talking about his woman this and this woman that. He was like, she looked like she got beat up with a couple of bags of nickels, which I was thinking to myself, like, wow, is that a thing? Right. And he was like, and so he's telling me about how, and it doesn't even matter how a person looks, right? Looks has absolutely nothing to do with it. It is this thing when our heads tell ourselves, we got this fear. People have this fear of losing what it is that they care about, they love, and they desire. And so those types of things, you got that dynamic that is going on. So some people have this amazing fear about betrayal, about loss, about abandonment. But on the other hand, they also recognize how good this can be to them, right? And that it is good for them. And so there is this pull either way that sometimes doesn't allow us to show up in our truth, doesn't allow us to show up as who we are. So when you start to think about how how these things manifest or how they play out, it's no wonder that we have this feeling of not wanting to go off the deep edge. And sometimes we end up being in relationships with people that we feel safe with, as opposed to people who we think will open us up, right? And that too is out of this fear that this is going to put me in a situation where I don't feel that I'm in control of me. And so those types of things can keep us from getting in where we could be, right? Of experiencing the ecstasy or the wonderment that we could feel. We're so busy pulling back because we're afraid of losing ourselves. And so that fear can be strong, right? That fear can threaten everything that we have. Oh man, remember that song, uh if it feels this good getting used, just keep on using me until you use me up. He was like, um his brother, everybody was telling them about this woman, and he was like, man, if you only knew. If you only knew. And so he says, if you only knew, you'd be wishing you was in my shoes. Just keep on using me. Because what happens is that at a certain point in our lives, we find out that sometimes those moments of wonder, those moments of just like, oh, this is good, whatever that may mean. And that could mean the conversation is good. That can mean that the food, it just seems like it's a perfect match, right? We're not just about the sex, but all of the stuff coming together. Just seems like it's just a match, right? And so sometimes when you get in those situations, you got sense enough to know like that's a sacred coming together. That's one of those things that that the Course in Miracles would call a holy instant, right? When you get two things working together that really work together. And then other people will run for the hills because they just so scared. Like, oh my gosh, I have the potential to lose everything, lose my freaking mind, right? And so there's that thing, right? The fear of all of that and stuff. And sometimes these fears are irrational. Most of the times they're probably irrational, because if it's good like that to you, it's probably good like that to them. And so, how do we trust ourselves enough? How do we have faith enough to go forward with the yes as opposed to the fear? And that's one of the things that we've been talking about, faith or fear, and which road does that cause you to take? So, so she talks about this thing about these extreme fears, especially of betrayal, and fear so strong it can threaten an intimate relationship. And so sometimes people make up imagined things. We make up stuff in our minds. When I was just in Miami, we were sitting at a restaurant and there was a man there who was with a woman, and neither one of them looked like a catch. Both of them looked like they were on something. They, just whatever the toxicity in that union was, it was just not only all over their person, all over their body, but even in how they talk to one another. And so the guy was sitting up there and I didn't know who he was talking to at first, but he was cursing so much and so bad. It's like you're looking like, what? You're kind of trying to check out, like, who would you be talking to like that? And then you notice that he's sitting with a woman. And finally, he stands up, and because he was telling her to get off the phone and he was cursing about whoever it was on the phone. And finally, he stands up and he smacks the darn phone. She's holding the phone. I think it was up to her ear, but finally he just smacks the phone off of her. And luckily he hit the phone and not her, right? Or her hand with the phone in it and not her. But he smacks the phone down and said, "Ain't no goddamn Uber driver. What you think, I'm stupid?" And then he goes over there and he sits back down and he takes the phone and then he dials the last number, I guess, that she was talking to. But all of this played out right there in the doggone restaurant. And you see this thing happening over and over again in different scenarios where people sometimes create stuff. I'm in a car driving down the street with a guy, right? This was way back in the day. And we pull up to a stoplight. And I turn my head and I look over because there's a guy sitting in the bus stop. And like we do, you nod, right? And me thinking nothing of it, it was just because our eyes met. I nodded like my hello, and I turned around like not paying attention to it. And this fool starts talking about, who is that? What you do? Blah, blah, blah. What? You looking like what? Like, knucklehead, I saw this dude at the same time you did. But in his mind, he's making up a whole story. And so, it becomes, sometimes it's your own stuff that's in your head. Sometimes you're projecting, sometimes it is what you would have done. That could be your story. Or sometimes it's our own insecurity that says that, oh my gosh, if I love this woman, if I'm feeling this woman, everybody else want to feel her too, which ain't true. Right? Those are the stories that we tell ourselves. Now, let me say this to y'all, right? When you see this early on, if it's not something that you address or something that can be managed, it's time to bounce, right? Because it does not get better. And I don't know about y'all, but Sandra don't do that. Sandra not playing that. You are not. We are not going there. So it's not going to get better. It's not going to get better. And so I'm just putting that out there for what it's worth. And you're going to say, yeah, but, okay, you can say all your yeah, buts, but it doesn't necessarily change how Sandra operates, right? Sandra has found out that stuff that is a person's personal issues. I shared a couple of weeks ago that that I was watching this program and they were talking about questions that, when you first meet somebody, right? Um, Stuff that you should listen for or look for is stuff just like that. Or but in the person when they were talking, this doctor who she was talking, I forget, I don't even know that I looked up her name, but she was saying one of the first questions you should ask people is, so what kind of work have you done on yourself? Just to be curious to see if they've actually tried to do any work on their issues or in improving themselves. Because if they haven't, then they probably won't. They probably have something against that type of thing. And so it's always interesting or curious to find out just where a person is as far as self-awareness is concerned, and taking responsibility for their own emotional work. And emotional work is necessary. Otherwise, we just think that, we are at the effect of whatever it is we're feeling or thinking. So I think I think it's a valid thing. And that's one of the reasons why I read and I talk and I have these kinds of conversations, because it's not. So when I was younger, not only did I date that knucklehead, and that was brief, right? Because the moment you start questioning wherever my eyes go, we in trouble, right? Because I am a friendly, outgoing person, right? And it's disheartening to see people, and we see it all the time, who change, who shrink because of a relationship or somebody like pressing them to be somebody they are not. I'd rather be by myself, right, than to have to continuously shrink down to make somebody else comfortable. So there was another guy who I went out with, and I think it was like a first or second date. He was fine. OMG, he was fine. I mean, just beautiful. He was one of those men. He was beautiful. But when he asked me the question all nice and sweet, like we sitting up there talking and everything, and just talking, and he asked me the question, he was like, well, he says, don't you think that there are times when, he was like, kind of like, I don't know, I think he was tracing the muscles or something on my neck. And he was like, well, don't you think there are times when you deserve to be hit? I was like, oh, dude, you got me twisted. I don't care how, I don't care who you are, how fine you are. You got me twisted, right? That was the last time. That was the last time I saw bro man, right? Because when you sit there and try to justify what you about to do, and it ain't even happened yet, you already trying to justify it. Like, when I deserve, like, I wouldn't say, are there times when you deserve? Because yeah, I'm not even gonna go through that. I'm gonna give as good as I get. No, we're not even going there. If because I will tell you about me, I don't even like when you try to call me out of my name. Bambi who? Right? No, 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 no. My name. I got a name. I got a name. Anyway, let me get off of my stuff. Let me get off of my stuff and say that you have got to be aware. You have got to be alert, because people tell you who they are. And one of the things I think that Maya Angelou tells you, she said, is when somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Because if you waiting for them to circle back and show you again, ooh, child, you already missed it. So yes. Now let me go ahead with this, because I want to finish out this page before I'm on 149. I want to finish out this page before I get off of here, which will be shortly. Cultural views about sexuality are different in societies, and I found that out big time when because I always tell y'all about my experiences, so I found that out big time when I was in Italy. The idea around sex in Italy was so very different than it is here. While I never, well, whatever. What I found about Italian men that I thought was very interesting is that they have this tendency, especially when they get excited or they like a woman. What now, this is not to say I had a good cross section, because I don't know that this is true about all men. But what I found is that they have a tendency to turn into infants when they are in a kind of a sexual energy with a woman. So instead of them getting macho, it's almost like they want to lay their head on your chest, or they want to start talking like baby talk, or doing little BS like that, which I found totally repulsive at the time. But I saw it occur enough for me to think, like, what the hell is that about, right? So when it says cultural views of sexuality are different in different cultures, yes, you will see that played out over and over again. If you have ever dated somebody from an African culture, you will see that the notions around sex are different there. If you have ever dated someone from an islanders, those things and perceptions around body and body image are so very different. And what they find sexy and appealing are so very different. So while you may see in some cultures this idea that skinny is better, and you may go to another culture and they are celebrating all your rolls and all your creases and all of that stuff. They looking for that. They want it. And there's something about it that says to them, that, what did one guy say? He said that obesity, he didn't call it obesity, but that's the name that I'm giving it, fat girl. That was how he said it, fat girl, come here, fat girl. And he said that showed prosperity. If you had, because to be fat, he was saying that meant not only did your family have money enough to feed everybody and you well, and that meant that you wasn't out working hard, busting your butt all day. And so it was, to them, to be a fat girl was somehow appealing and something that they were really after, or something that they wanted, and it gets them going. So all of these are different, like, cultural experiences or expressions. And could you see that? How, come on. So anyway, let me start. So the puritanical history of American culture, combined with the value that we place on sexual control, patriarchy, right? Patriarchy, contributes substantially to the widespread shame people feel about their bodies and sexual natures. So she said that during many of her workshops, participants shared personal stories of their unfulfilled sexual lives, right? And they are as numerous as those who come to the workshop to improve their health. So some people go to the workshops just because they've got an illness that came up, but also people who go and they feel like, wow, people keep telling me that orgasms are possible, or that ecstasy is possible, or that this is possible, and I haven't experienced that and I want to. And so at times we're looking for somebody tell me how to get there. And sometimes the main barrier is in our own heads, in our own thinking. And so I think that that's one of those things to be conscious of or cognizant of. Many report having lived with a mate for years, even decades, and never having one conversation, she says, about their sexual needs. And so the reasons given are variations of identical feelings ranging from embarrassment to the lack of awareness about what it means to have personal sexual needs. So, this idea of people feeling awkward or embarrassed, and it's interesting because you would think that in the midst of something that is so intimate, that is so, lay bare, open, wide type of thing, you would think that people would be able to be more forthright with their feelings and their needs and their desires, but that is not always the case. And sometimes one person's awkwardness makes another person feel awkward too. Because a lot of times when you don't feel heard or seen or acknowledged, or say, for instance, you tell a person that you need more of this or more of that, and then what they do is they revert right back, it shows that people aren't really hearing you, or they're not really respecting you or your desires. And so sometimes it seems as though it just seems like it's easier just to do without than to go through the frustration of not being acknowledged, or somebody not addressing what you said was important to you. It can cause one person to feel is put upon and to check out of the scenario. So this sexual shame, so prevalent in our tribal mind, contributes to American society need to generate rules setting proper and improper sexual behavior. Yet another paradox of the second chakra, since the natural energy of the second chakra moves away from the self towards the other, right? Its characteristic fear produces a need to control sexual behavior. Thus, the tribe validates married and monogamous couples and attempts to shame any others. Some states consider certain types of sex, like sodomy and stuff like that, to be criminal rather than merely improper. And regardless of the fact that sexuality is voluntary between consenting adults, meaning both of us had to consent to this, but some people will make it like, even if you consent to it, it is a criminal act. So most particularly, this illegal condemnation was directed at homosexuality. So this idea about the second chakra and all of the sexual issues that are involved in that vary, and they are something that can either set us free or can further inhibit us in our ability to connect with others. And so one of the reasons why this is so important is that this is the section where, yes, it is about honoring one another, but there is also this place of honoring oneself and your needs, right? And if in the context of this, you are feeling as though this is something that is holding you back, or someplace where you are not feeling fully actualized, it can impact how you feel about yourself and how you feel about your own sexuality. And it's working through all of these things that brings you closer to this chakra being ignited or engaged or fully opened and ready to express. And so remember, we are moving through a chakra system that starts off with the all is one in the tribal area. And now we are moved into the number 2 in this second chakra area, which means honor one another. This is all about relationships, right? And so when, as we go on through this, and I'll get into this tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit more about this thing of shame and how shame impacts this. As a matter of fact, while I'm thinking about it, maybe I need to revisit some of, Brene Brown does a lot of work around shame, and I love the language and how she talks about what shame does to us and how it can be suppressive, oppressive, in our systems, and cause us to not be able to have the very connections that we so desire. And so if somebody has shamed you at certain points, especially when it comes down to relationships and sexuality, that too can be impactful, causing you to shut down and not connect, and therefore have what we call arrested development in that particular area. So we are hopefully about trying to figure out how to open this up within ourselves, right? How to get that chakra opens, which means that sometimes it is about dealing with shame. How do we and I can sit there and I can say, oh, for me, I have found that um I have found that giving voice to things removes the shame around it. And so if I give voice to it, I'm not holding something in secret and something in private. But if you've already got shame around stuff, most of the time people don't necessarily talk about what they feel shamed about until they get into the context of therapy. If you need somebody to listen to you, there is help out there. You can find various people that can help you. If you want to send me a private message, that's cool. But the power of confession does work. That power of putting it out there does make us realize sometimes that what we thought, if the world knew, it wouldn't love us or like us or accept us. Once we put it out there or find out that that's not true, man, it's amazing what can open up for you, right? And so make a choice of, you can make a choice of whether you're going to suffer in silence or whether you're going to set yourself free. That's what this is all about, right? So we'll continue on with this tomorrow, and I'll be here same time, 7:15ish. Stephanie wasn't here today, or wasn't able to make it because she had internet issues, but I still appreciate her checking in and having the willingness to come forward and talk about these things, because it's not always easy for people, right? I get that. And just because I find it amazingly, wonderfully curious, and yeah, all of those things. Yeah, I appreciate that. I found out. Would you stop laying behind my chair, baby? Come here. I didn't mean to roll over you, but you got to stop laying behind my chair. I'm sorry, y'all. All right. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Here, sit here. Sit here. Don't lay behind me. Oh, I get, you heard it. Anyway, she, my dog doesn't like when I move. I should send her to therapy, right? So she'll lay right up under me or behind me, and this chair has rollers, and it's not the first time she's, yeah. All right, so let me go take care of my little girl. All right, y'all. Thank you for being here. I will see you tomorrow. God willing, and the creek don't rise. All right, blessings to you. I bow deeply to you. Tomorrow I do too. Tomorrow is Sunday. I can't believe that this week rolls around so quickly. So, all right. I'll see you tomorrow. All right.